Hi, everybody. Welcome to Connecticut River Conservancy's Trash Talk, updating bottle bills for cleaner rivers. My name is Stacy Leonard, and I'm the events organizer and the Source to Sea cleanup coordinator here at CRC. And we're really excited to have everybody here today. We have a wonderful array of presenters who will talk about bottle bill legislation in our 4 watershed states, and I'll be introducing them in a moment. Before we start, just want to give the usual housekeeping details. We are recording this presentation for later access, and I will be sending out an email later today with the link to get to that and additional resources that are mentioned today. The recording will be up within 24 hours. We encourage you to ask questions and really have a great conversation here. So please put your questions in the chat box at the bottom of your screen at any time during the presentation, but we will hold questions until the end and try to get to as many as we can. Wanted to also let folks know that there will be a second trash talk coming on November 10th at noon called What is Extended Producer Responsibility? And I'll put the link to that in the email as well. Okay, to put this all in context, this year was our 25th year of organizing the Source to Sea cleanup. And that we don't have this year's data tallied yet. There are still groups out there this month. You can see from last year that beverage containers are a huge amount of the trash that are picked up from our waterways. And there's a breakdown here between bottles, plastic cans, and those little ubiquitous nips or the mini alcohol bottles. It's clear we need to fight the trash battle from many angles, and picking up at the cleanup is one critical method. But pairing that with legislation to stop trash in the first place will double our impact. So I'm going to introduce our speakers who will go into depth on this topic. We're going to start with CRC's own river stewards. We have Andrea Donlon from Massachusetts. Maybe folks can just wave their hands as I mention you so people will know who you are when you come up. Kelsey Wentling from Connecticut, Kathy Urffer in Vermont and New Hampshire, and they'll share some background on the bottle bills and what we're doing state by state. Then we'll hear from Jim McCullough, the Vermont State Representative from Chittenden County and Vice Chair of the Vermont House Committee on Natural Resources, Fish and Wildlife. And then followed by Lauren Fernandez, who's the Zero Waste Policy Analyst at Conservation Law Foundation. So I'd like to turn it over to Andrea to get us started.
All right, thank you, Stacy. Hi, Andrea Donlon, Massachusetts River Steward for CRC. Wanted to give context of what, just so everybody's on the same page, what is a bottle bill? This is a law that requires distributors and retailers to collect a deposit, usually 5 or 10 cents for each beverage container. And it creates a privately funded collection infrastructure for beverage containers that makes producers and consumers responsible for their packaging waste. Next slide. That's not the next slide. Okay. So bottle bills came about, many states that have them passed the legislation in the 1970s and early 1980s. And this originated because all of a sudden there were throwaway, no deposit beverage containers everywhere. It used to be that you could buy a case of beer or soda and you'd pay for a deposit on the entire case, and then you'd return all the bottles and the cardboard case back to the distributor and get your deposit back. And these bottles were then cleaned and relabeled and then reused, not recycled, reused out to other consumers. When this changed, all of a sudden there was a lot more littering and wasted resources, and when I was a kid in the 1970s, I was just constantly worried about getting a bicycle flat tire because there was tons of broken glass on the road, and that did change in the 80s when Massachusetts passed a bottle bill. So the solution was to put a mandatory deposit on beverage containers to provide an incentive to recycle and a disincentive to litter. Beverage containers are targeted because they are consumed frequently on the go. About a third of soft drinks that are sold are consumed away from the home. They are often littered. They consume an enormous amount of energy in the manufacturing process, which contributes to greenhouse gas emissions that can be avoided if you reuse or recycle containers, and they do comprise a significant volume of the waste stream. This slide shows the enormous increase in the number of plastic water bottles sold in the United States. Back when the bottle bills were enacted, single-use water bottles were not even sold, and so nobody put them into their bottle bills. And now in 2017, it shows that there's 70.4 billion water bottles sold in the US. So that sort of speaks to the need to expand our existing bottle bills. Deposit systems have a number of benefits. The redemption incentive produces higher recycling rates. When you sort recyclables, you can have a clean material for recycling and manufacturing, and oftentimes in municipal recycling collection, or whether you bring your recyclables to a facility or have it collected, there still can be contamination that leads to the product not actually getting recycled. They can create new jobs and businesses that are not outsourced overseas. It shifts the end of life costs for used beverage containers to the producers that are responsible for the waste. It reduces litter and pollution, as I mentioned before, and recycling can reduce energy use and greenhouse gases. This slide shows that though there are recycling programs that are fairly, residents in the US have access, many residents have access to recycling, but it is really the bottle bill states that have a much better recycling rate than the non-bottle bill states. And this varies by type of beverage container. But there's a difference between sort of a collection rate for recycling and actual recycling. And so this shows that bottle bill states really do have a much better rate for these bottles. Next slide. This is a pretty busy slide, but the states that have bottle bills are shown in orange. And then this also indicates that 8 out of the 10 highest states that have the best recycling rate for beverage containers and packaging containers, 8 out of the 10 highest recyclers are bottle bill states. A lot of states are not bottle bill states. Next up, we will hear from Kelsey about what's going on in Connecticut.
Hi, my name's Kelsey Wentling. I'm the river steward for the state of Connecticut. And we're going to go state by state just to give updates on what's happened and what we're looking forward to in each of our watershed states. So Starting in Connecticut, the bottle bill was first implemented over 40 years ago now. And since that time, it hasn't really undergone any major changes. Plastic water bottles were added in 2009. And then in 2001, a new bottle bill was passed and signed by the governor. In Connecticut, we have a recycling rate of only about 52%, which is a 2018 number of beverage containers, and a redemption rate of only 44% in 2020, which is one of the lowest or the lowest redemption rate, so bottles that are returned to a vending machine in any of the states that actually have a bottle bill. So it was really great that environmental organizations and legislators worked together to pass a modernized bottle bill in 2021. Some of the things that were included in this update was that the deposit fee went from 5 cents to 10 cents. So now when you go to bring your bottles back to the redemption center, there's a greater incentive to bring them back with that 10-cent fee. The bill also expanded the list of beverage containers that you can redeem. So instead of just beer and water, it added a whole list of things that may not even have existed in 1978, unless hard seltzer was a thing then too. But it includes these non-carbonated beverages, energy drinks and sports drinks, tea, juice, iced coffee. So many more containers that we often see littered in our environment, you can now bring back and get your 10 cents. Another great addition to or update to this bill was that the fee that redemption centers receive for handling and processing the beverage containers was increased. So it used to be 1.5 cents, between 1.5 and 2 cents, depending on the type of beverage container. And that will go up to 2.5 to 3.5 cents. And this is really important because redemption centers in Connecticut could barely function on a 1.5 to 2 cent fee paid per container. So this increase will allow redemption centers to remain open and hopefully new redemption centers to open throughout the state so people have more options close to their homes where they can bring their beverage containers. This isn't all going to happen immediately. The 10-cent deposit does not go into effect until 2024. And that expanded list of beverage containers will be implemented in 2023. Finally, there were some major issues with this bottle bill update. One is that it does not cover liquor and wine bottles. And that includes almost 40% of all beverage containers that go into single stream recycling in Connecticut. So that's a major omission. And included in that are those miniature bottles or nips that you see virtually everywhere. We find tons of them in our cleanups. You see them on the road. Can everyone hear me? Okay, just making sure. So those had been part of the bottle bill, but that was actually taken out as a concession to the beverage industry. And instead, there's a 5-cent fee at the point of sale that will go to municipalities to do cleanups, which does virtually nothing to prevent the nips from getting into the environment in the first place. The second major issue with the 2021 bottle bill was that at the very last minute, the beverage industry lobbied to have power over the stewardship organization that controls this whole program. So rather than the state taking charge, the beverage industry, which has opposed updates to the bottle bill, will now oversee things like how much the deposit rate is. So they could, in theory, bring it back down to 5 cents, take out different types of containers. There's no requirement for transparency or measurable targets. And because it's managed by private industry, the public does not have input into how these decisions are made. So there's still work to be done in Connecticut, but we're also eager to see what's happening in our other watershed states. Since of course, a littered bottle doesn't stop at the Massachusetts-Connecticut border and might float down into our parts. So with that, I'll hand it back to Andrea.
Thanks, Kelsey. Massachusetts does have a bottle bill that was implemented in January of 1983. There's a 5-cent deposit on beer, malt beverages, and carbonated non-alcoholic drinks. Redemption centers and retailers do get a handling fee. And like Kelsey said, it's a pretty small amount that hasn't changed since 1983 with all the other cost increases out there. So that highlights the need to increase the deposit fee as time goes on. Unredeemed deposits in Massachusetts go into the general fund. They used to fund recycling programs in the state, but this changed under Governor Mitt Romney. Massachusetts has a return rate of between 50 to 71%, and it's been trending downward over the last 10 years. Overall, Massachusetts has a recycling rate for common containers and packaging materials of 52%. That sounds not that high, but it is one of the highest in the country. There are some proposed updates to the bottle bill. There's an act to expand the bottle bill going through the state legislature right now. And Lauren Fernandez of the Conservation Law Foundation will be providing more details on that bill and where it stands later in this program. Moving north, turn it over to Kathy Urffer, who will cover New Hampshire and Vermont.
Thanks, Andrea. So there is no bottle bill in New Hampshire. And so for New England, it's interesting to look at New Hampshire almost as a test in comparison with what's happening in the other states. So no bottle bill. The last legislative attempt to pass a bottle bill was in 2014, and it was previously attempted in 2011. And so, as you can assume, the recycling rate in New Hampshire is not great, only 32% in 2018. It's the lowest in New England. As Kelsey said, the opposition to the bottle bill comes from the Beverage Association, beverage distributors, grocery associations, and things like that. And so in New Hampshire, those folks actually got together to develop a nonprofit that is called New Hampshire the Beautiful, that provides really limited support to try to support recycling in the state. And so they are set up as a nonprofit and provide a few grants to help people with no littering signs, to do some no littering pickup, to provide, recycling containers and things like that. But compared to the impetus that an actual bottle bill clearly, can provide in the state, it's pretty limited. So, our recommendation, obviously, New Hampshire is prime for being able to pass a bottle bill. And I think that would, assist in some of the waste disposal issues in the state. Next slide, Stacy. Because the Connecticut River makes up the border of both Vermont and New Hampshire, at the moment I am river steward for both states. So I have to, work from this schizophrenic brain where one side is New Hampshire and the other is Vermont. Alternately, in Vermont, we're doing very well. As you might have seen on the little map we showed before, Vermont has the second highest recycling rate in the nation, only, second only to Maine. And so we have had a bottle bill in Vermont that was implemented in July of 1973. Deposit amount is 5 cents, 15 cents for liquor bottles. Currently only for liquor bottles over 50 milliliters. The beverages covered include beer, malt, carbonated soft drinks, mixed wine drinks, and liquor. And as I said, the recycling rate is quite high, 62% in 2018, and the redemption rate is quite high, 77% in 2020. Like the other states, there's a handling fee for managing these materials. And up until 2019, the unredeemed deposits would go back to the distributors. But as of 2019, any unclaimed deposits are actually now brought into the general fund and are specifically allocated for clean water programs in the state, which is awesome. Representative McCullough, who's joining us here, sponsored H-175, which was introduced last January. And so that passed the House. That is an update to the bottle bill. And I will pass it off to the representative in just 1 minute to sort of update us. But what is proposed in that legislation would expand the bottle bill to include water bottles, wine bottles, and all other containers except for milk products. The legislation also initially was to increase the deposit from 5 cents to 10 cents. And then this was amended back to 5 cents on the floor, I believe, when it was passed by the House. It also removed the minimum size limit, or will remove the minimum size limit for liquor bottles, which means that all liquor bottles would have a 15-cent deposit and increase the handling fee for the distributors. So with that, we'll leave it on this slide, and I would invite Representative McCullough to just share any updates, thoughts on the bottle bill in Vermont, how it's moving, and what the next steps are.
All right. I very much appreciate the invitation to present here today. I will be likely reiterating some of the points that have been made, but I think that repetition is important for all of us. I do want to say that H-175, the fairly comprehensive rewrite of our bottle bill, existing bill in the state, is the effort. It is my bill, but VPIRG, Paul Burns and his company, major contributors in the writing of this bill. And as not only just the writing, but the defense of it. Of course, they came into our committee, and VPIRG presented a lot of information to our members in support of this bill. So I believe this is an environmental bill, for sure. Of course, the River Conservancy agrees as far as the trash in the river, but it goes beyond trash in the river, our ditches and medians and even out in the forest. It's an environmental bill that also makes money for people. It saves money for municipalities in the state of Vermont, and it does, as mentioned, create jobs. And certainly, since our bill was introduced, passed in '72, the landscape has greatly changed. The 5-cent deposit as proposed in the bill, went to 10 cents. The Ways and Means Committee recommended to the floor of the House that be dropped from 10 cents to 5 cents. Their rationale, in my opinion, is flawed. They felt that it would reduce, because recycling rates would increase. It would reduce funds that went to our water quality fund, which is where the sheets dollars go. And that came out, that bill, the sheets that was mentioned, the sheets is the money that the distributors have to pay for non-redeemed containers. So the sheets now go to the state of Vermont and are directed to the water quality fund. I think that their rationale was flawed, because we're including virtually all beverages now. So while the redemption rate will go up, as demonstrated in other states with 10%, with 10 cents rather, the landscape of the number of bottles increases by factors. The number of containers, the types of containers increases by factors. And it's my estimation that it's not going to deplete our clean water fund at all. And in fact, will likely add to it. But that was their thought, and I think it was supported by a joint fiscal office. And I certainly have no data other than my crystal ball and I'm not sure they did either, to support that. Other states that have our Vermont return rate is 75% at a nickel, and Oregon, for instance, has 86% at a dime, and we certainly can do better also. We've already mentioned that this huge number of containers now, we're not even on the playing field before. Right now, 54% of our beverage containers sold in Vermont are not covered. We really only have a half a bottle bill, even though it looks like we got a whole one. Our plastic bottles are the second largest litter item. Water bottles. That's the second largest single pollutant in our environment. Only 25% of glass, that is to say 25% of glass that is sorted in our MRF is landfilled. The rest is, and it's too dirty to use. There are huge greenhouse gas savings that are accrued through the remanufacture of deposit containers into original containers. So what are we talking about here? Well, reduce, reuse, and recycle, of course, is the mantra. But we now are also thinking in terms of circular economies and upcycling. Just the fact that containers get into your blue bin and they get crushed and recycled, they're not getting upcycled because they're dirty and contaminated. They are likely getting downcycled, and versus redemption bottle containers are demonstrated throughout the country to be cleaner, and they can be remade into containers of the same type that they were originally, and then that just goes round and round and round, and that is a goal that we really need to be pursuing. We are hoping to raise our recycling fee to 5 cents for commingled containers. And it was mentioned that it includes all beverages except dairy and non-dairy as well. And we had quite an interesting discussion on, of course, there's the Agency of Agriculture around the country are concerned that almond milk is called milk, for instance, and oat milk is called milk. And you have already seen a lot of relabeling calling them drink. And so, but those are also exempted along with dairy products as milk substitutes or as dairy substitutes. There was there was an effort to support agricultural stands out in front of farms, and so there is an exclusion for non-alcoholic cider that is going to be kind of difficult to work, but there it is. We talked about upcycling and dead end recycling, and that's a very, very important concept to hold in mind. Our containers are way, way cleaner when they are recycled through the redemption process. Maine's recycling is at 89%, with similar types of containers that our new bill H-175 covers. We did add, similar to other states, Maine and Iowa, wine bottles, and wine. All glass containers are very. Glass is easy to upcycle, keep in the circular economy, but it's really heavy to lug around. Vermont is fortunate in that we have a plant fairly near to us that will be taking that glass. We had a bad thing happening with our Chittenden County Regional Landfill that was illegally crushing the glass and just dumping it. There was some confusion, it's felt by many about whether they were okay to do that or not, but the case was settled nolo contendere, and now different things are happening with that glass. We have a problem. How many times have you seen on various kinds of packaging that this product was made with 100% recycled material, 50%, pick a number. But in the beverage container arena, we are told by the producers, such as Coca-Cola, who has very high expectations for containers being made out of recycled material, that they're not getting and are really concerned in the future, near future, about getting enough clean, quality PET material to recycle and upcycle back into the economy. Our sheets in Vermont, our committee successfully managed to do that, get the sheets from the distributors. There was a major small warfare. It's unbelievable that other states have the beverage companies managing for them. That would clearly be, while a type of extended producer responsibility, doesn't sound like this one was set up that way, and the fox surely would be guarding the chicken house on that. So our sheets are an important part of our clean water fund. So we are living next to New Hampshire, and every time we attempt to make a change in the water bill, the bottle bill rather, we run up with the border state issues, a little where there is fraud that's purported, where New Hampshire bottles are brought to Vermont and redeemed, and the perpetrators walk away with a bag full of nickels. And that discussion through the years, even when we were just trying to raise the handling fee, has managed to not just hamper efforts, but defeat them. So we had, of course, that same argument by people in our committee, and the state of Vermont Agency of Natural Resources was testifying in our committee, and we had very qualified and long tenured person doing that testimony, who is all about even zero waste. I mean, she's just awesome, but was required to toe the company line, which is her secretary, who works for her governor, who happens to be our governor. And I bring this all out because it's part of the political process. And so she talked about this as well. I asked her to send me the documented cases of fraud, and so the number of documented cases and the amounts of fraud that were perpetrated in each instance, so that we could better understand this when we went to the floor with this bill. The
Tim, I
answer
might
was,
just-
we do not have any documented information. So with that, I would like to pass the presentation over to Lauren.
Thanks so much, Jim.
Thank you so much, Representative. Appreciate that. Thank you for sharing. So again, my name is Lauren Fernandez. I'm the Zero Waste Policy Analyst at the Conservation Law Foundation, which has offices throughout New England, but I am currently based out of the Boston office. So I want to talk, I know that we already heard a little bit today about what's happening with the Bottleville Massachusetts, but I wanted to expand, no pun intended, a little bit on the Bottleville expansion and what's happening with that now, and how you can help get this very important piece of legislation passed. So as we were told, Massachusetts already has a bottle bill, but it is desperately in need of an upgrade. I like to kind of think of like a little computer, like that's uploading something slowly, and I think that's what needs to happen in Massachusetts. What the current act to expand the bottle bill would propose is, what it proposes is to increase the deposit fee from 5 cents to 10 cents. And as we have seen, data around the country and around the world shows that the higher the deposit fee is, the higher the redemption rate will be for containers. You're putting monetary value on something like a plastic water bottle. People are going to take that. If they have 10 plastic water bottles, they're going to take that back and get their money back for that, because they've already paid for that and they know they can get something back for it. This new bill would expand the types of containers for redemption. So again, for anyone still unfamiliar with that word redemption, that means just taking it back to be returned. So at a redemption center, which are often found in grocery stores, or sometimes redemption centers are standalone. And there's, a machine that you can usually put it in, and, you get your deposit back. But I know that varies in place to place with bottle bills as well. But in this bill, the types of containers would expand to include plastic water bottles, plastic juice bottles, sports drinks, wine bottles, liquor bottles, and other drinks up to 3 liters. It's important to note that it does exclude milk containers. So plastic milk jugs are not included in that. Bottles for medicine, infant formulas, things like Ensure, like a meal replacement liquid container, that those things cannot be included, for some good reasons. So that would take a lot of, that would increase a lot of bottles that would end up recycled, that a lot of those bottles are currently right now getting landfilled, or they're ending up in our rivers, in our waterways, in our oceans, and on the streets of our communities is litter. And so another benefit from the act to expand the Bottleville, Massachusetts is that this would save money for cities and towns. With a lot of the shifts that have happened in the recycling market over the past few years, particularly that Western countries like the United States, we have really limited options of where to send our waste now. China is no longer accepting a lot of our waste. That's where a lot of it was going for years. And so that, because there's a lack of market for so many recyclable materials, like so many of these bottles, that's really shot up the cost for cities and towns. There's just a myriad of factors that's contributed to that. So if we were to take these bottles out of a system like curbside recycling, that's less tonnage that needs to be recycled, that cities and towns have to manage. So that's less money that they have to pay. So instead we have another more efficient recycling system where we know that these bottles are guaranteed to get recycled as they should be. If you can go on to the next slide, please. So it sounds like there's lots of benefits. So I want to share a little bit about what's happening with the bill right now. So many of you may or may not know, the legislative session in Massachusetts last 2 years. And just to give you a little bit background of who has sponsored these bills. Oh yes, and it does include NIPS. Sorry, I forgot to include that one. Somebody just dropped that in the chat. That was one of them I forgot. I know it's a long list of bottles that are included. So it does include other alcohol bottles like NIPS, wine, and liquor again. So to go back, the House bill is being sponsored by Representative Marjorie Decker. The Senate bill, Massachusetts, is being sponsored by Senator Cynthia Cream. And it's right now in the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy. And they actually held a public hearing for that last month in September, which had a really positive turnout. I was there, I was able to provide oral and written testimony. And I was really encouraged by the amount of positive turnout we had. There were so many residents and community leaders and folks who work for cities and towns who turned out in support of the bottle bill and urge our legislators to pass this important piece of legislation. And so we've had there are many legislators who have been incredibly supportive of the bottle bill, who have signed on and say that they support this and are urging for its passage. I think that's been very encouraging to me. We can move on to the next slide, please. But we still, continue to need support. It's important that your legislators, they are elected officials. They are elected to serve you and to serve your communities, and to help bring good change to our communities. And the bottle bill would do that. It would, create healthier, cleaner communities. So ask your legislator to support the bottle bill expansion. You can, and if you don't like to make phone calls, because I know that a lot of people, that's becoming less and less part of our mainstream culture. You can still call your legislator. You can find all that information online. But you can also tweet at them. A lot of legislators are on Twitter and, have their teams check Twitter and they also keep track of emails, coming in, of, what are my constituents concerned about? What kind of bills do they care about? What kind of issues? So these are different ways that you can ask your legislator if they've not yet signed on to support the bottle bill expansion in Massachusetts. You can be part of that by urging them to do so. You can also share with your networks to gain support for this. Don't ever underestimate, what kind of power one-to-one conversation can have, or posting on your social media. I've had some really good conversations, people who just weren't as aware of things like the bottle bill legislation and how that could really change, how this really has the power to address our waste crisis, to reduce the amount of waste being produced, to to help lessen the impacts that we're seeing of the climate crisis, because our waste crisis and climate crisis are completely overlapped with each other. A lot of people are sometimes not, are not able to keep up to date as this. So don't ever underestimate, the power of sharing with your own networks, and letting other people know that about this, and that they can also urge the legislators to support the bottle bill in Massachusetts. So I think that's really one of the best things that, we could, leaving with kind of like a clear next step. That's one of the best things that we could ask folks to do. And just to give you a little bit overview, I'll just end my time just sharing a little bit more about the Zero Waste Project at the Conservation Law Foundation. So we are a small team of some are attorneys, others are working communications. I'm a policy analyst, like myself, and we also have some interns that are really amazing and a great support to our team. So we use research the law and market to develop and advocate for good legislation that would help reduce waste, that addresses the waste crisis at the issue. We are really trying to move our communities in New England towards a real zero waste future, with moving away from dependency on landfill and incinerators that disproportionately impact environmental justice communities. And what I mean by environmental justice communities, those are defined typically, of lower income, often communities of color, often communities that majority are not English as a first language, so often have a lot of, are often marginalized in a lot of different ways, and these are often the communities taking on the burdens of pollution, of the impacts of climate change, of waste, of polluting facilities like incinerators. So we do our best to do this work through an environmental justice lens, and to learn and be led by leaders from environmental justice communities, and also to do work that would to address where the impact is being felt the most often. So just to give you a little bit of background about more of what I'm involved with at the Conservation Law Foundation. I know there will be some further information if you'd like to stay connected. I know there will be some further information sent out later today, how you can stay connected to the work happening at the Conservation Law Foundation, as well as other organizations represented today. So that's all I have for today. But thank you so much for the opportunity to share a little bit more today about the Massachusetts bottle bill expansion. And I appreciate your time.
So we will want to definitely have some time for questions. I will just point out, in all cases, we really need folks to step up, ask questions, and communicate about these issues. That's how change happens. So as mentioned, we'll follow up with an email with some links to, Connecticut River has action alerts around legislation that we send out periodically. We would urge folks to support legislation around updating the bottle bill in your state. If you live in Massachusetts and Connecticut, during our Source to Sea cleanup, we have a postcard campaign, and we're glad to provide you with some postcards specifically about including NIPS in the bottle bill in those states, since we are finding lots and lots of NIPS during the Source to Sea cleanup. And then also just a reminder that we have another trash talk coming up on November 10th that will talk about extended producer responsibility in general. And so please join us for that. So Stacy, maybe if you want to stop sharing, we can open it up for questions and have a little bit of conversation before we all have to continue on with our day.
That sounds great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to all of our presenters for giving their time today. Just putting the list here, and I will share this in the email, so don't feel pressured to scribble it down. So let's turn over to the Q&A. I know that people have been writing in the chat already, and hopefully some of those questions have been answered. I will do my best to field some questions to our presenters. And And I encourage any of our presenters to jump in with a question in case I don't see something. I see a question here, and actually I wanted to acknowledge there's a lovely classroom of students on the line, of young people. I'm really excited to see this multi-generational. Hi to the kids from wherever you are. Thanks for being here. And we hope that if you have a question, maybe your teacher can pop it in the chat. Oh, this one is Karen. This is Karen. Okay, hello. We are quota scientists from Queen of the Apostles Preparatory Academy in Plainville, Connecticut. We're interested in helping protect the river. Please let us know. Okay, sorry, I didn't realize it wasn't a question. You will be on our list now, and you can sign the action list. Do any of your kids have a question they want to pose?
Thank you so much. Question?
No.
You sure?
Yes.
Just had a question, Noah. Why don't you ask it?
Oh, I said, how did you guys get the water bottles?
How do you get the water bottles out of the rivers if you're in the boats? Is Noah's question.
Who would like to?
All right, I'll try that one out. Sometimes it's really helpful if you have a net with you and you can kind of scoop it out with a net. But sometimes if you're in a boat, canoe, or a kayak, you're actually close enough to the water where you can just reach down and pick it up right out of the river. So both those ways work well. And then if you're just near the river on the shore, sometimes getting the trash that's along the riverbank on the land, make sure it doesn't get into the water in the first place.
Great, thank you.
Right. Thank you so much.
Sure, and if you have more questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll get to them. And also you can contact us afterwards as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure. I know that some of the questions in the chat have been answered, so I don't want to be redundant. So I'm trying to find ones that haven't. Question for Jim: with the removal of liquor minimum size, would new Vermont bill include nip bottles as well? Maybe that was already discussed.
Well, I think I did, but yes, the nips are included in our bottle bill. There is an interesting caveat that the Department of Liquor and Lottery do not have to return the sheets, but they were very supportive of adding nips to the bill, and I think we can all probably imagine the nips are a great way to drink and drive and get rid of your bottles so that if you get stopped, you don't have anything in your car. It would be helpful if somebody would clarify the sheets thing that has been said, and I don't know that everybody can see the chat, but I could do that.
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
A sheets is a I think maybe Latin term that says what belongs to us. So the state of Vermont maintained in 2017, our committee maintained to the distributors that the money that they were pocketing for the deposits that never got returned really belonged to the state of Vermont, did not belong to them. And that's what that means. Quite literally, something that belongs to us.
thank you. There's a question for Lauren. Why was the Massachusetts bottle bill sent to the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy, and not Natural Resources?
So I'm not completely sure, honestly. That's something I have to check on again. I feel like I heard a little bit about it, but didn't get a clear answer. But I thought that was interesting too, that's where it ended up.
In Connecticut, which is Joy asked, what can we do to get Butlers Hands off and give back to state to the state to manage?
Yeah, good question. So the ultimate solution would be a legislative action that removes this power from the bottle industry so that they are not the ones running the stewardship organization. That will take some time, but in the meantime, I think continuing to keep pressure on local legislators and let them know you're not satisfied with this outcome is really important. And then even putting pressure on corporations. I mean, it's not a good look for them. And making sure they know that you think that could, at least in the meantime, keep them accountable to not decrease the deposit back down to 5 cents, for example. So using your voice to call them out and to let your legislators know what you want to see change.
Great. And David asks, what about advertising campaigns like the Keep America Beautiful campaign? Is that helpful? Can anyone speak to that?
Well,
Oh,
Michael,
I can
Fabian?
speak to it. Yeah, Keep America Beautiful was the response that the beverage industry had to oppose bottle bills, and they, gave money to municipalities originally in lieu of what they might have earned through the bottle bill or got through grants from the bottle bill. But it was really a distraction. It really never worked. They were never really able to give the municipalities enough money to ever reach the recycling rates that the bottle bill states were reaching. So it's been mostly just a front and not very effective. And that's a shame.
Mm.
One of the things that it's important to understand is how the bottle bill industry or the beverage industry opposes bottle bills is because they're claiming that bottle bills and the collection systems that are set up through the distributors are redundant, that it's just paralleling municipal programs that are already doing the same thing. Of course, this is another illusion because the materials collected through the bottle bill is the kind of waste that the beverage industries really want in order to recycle because it's cleaner. That was mentioned already a couple of times. So again, it's the kind of tactics that the beverage industry uses, again, are effective, but they're just not true. So hope that helps.
yeah, it looks like Brenda was asking that question of what is the opposition that the corporate folks are putting up and what are some good talking points against to address that. Hopefully that helps answer that question. Have I missed any others, or perhaps we can go to just people raising hands who have a question? We have another minute or two.
Okay, Michael.
Michael?
Yeah, I just was wondering, why do we have to restrict our recycling to beverage containers? Glass is a really big problem. And so why can't we include all glass to be included in quote unquote a bottle bill? I mean, glass like, ketchup and relish and mustard and tomato sauce, and because these are really big contaminants and they have absolutely no recycle value at all. So it would cost recycling programs to have these things in the recycling stream. And again, there is no beneficial reuse to this material at all. So is anybody considering, expanding the bottle bill to non-beverage glass containers?
That's a great question. Any perspective from Jim or Lauren?
Well, that has been talked about in Vermont. It is baby steps to the office, Bob. I mean, so that would be another entire producer responsibility likely type action versus a redemption type. And you're going to be covering redemption or producer responsibility in a little bit. In Vermont, we have a new problem called depackaging, where the major waste hauler in the state of Vermont takes all the waste, all the outdated foods that are in the grocery stores, all the outdated mistakes of ice creams and other things, just crushes them and smashes them and then send them off for composting. But or turning into energy. But they all produce, but they're producing microplastics that are a huge problem. And so why would the beverage industry, so I'm going to go back and answer in part the question, well, why is the beverage industry fighting this? Well, just one simple part is the sheets. In Vermont, with only a nickel on just a few types of beverages, that amounted to a little over $3 million last year. Who would not want to keep $3 million in their piggy bank instead of turning it over? So that's one major reason they fight it from day one.
Yeah, I had the same question about why the milk bottles and other dairy products are not in the mix, but I assume it's also those baby steps you're talking about and the industry backlash. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I just want to say
it's the dairy industry.
Yeah. We are at the end of our time, so I will say if anybody wants to stay on another minute or two, we can go over. We will put a bunch of resources and links in an email that I'll send later. And I'll try to pull together some talking points on addressing corporate industry as best we can. And really, really want to again appreciate everybody for coming out today, giving us an hour of your time, and especially to Jim and Lauren for being here and sharing all that you're working on. We really, really appreciate it. And a lot of the things that were mentioned, like for example, the points Lauren was making in Massachusetts, those are really across any state. So all of these actions are really applicable. Okay, so anyone who needs to leave, thank you so much for being here. And anybody who wants to stay on, let's take another couple of minutes. You can raise your hand if you have a question. Or maybe we're feeling the energy wane.
Yeah. I think Brenda,
Okay.
you had a question about explain redundancy in municipal recycling. So one of the things that the opponents to the bottle bill, mostly the grocers associations, et cetera, will say is that we already have a recycling system set up in many municipalities. And so doing something like the bottle bill would just be creating the same system, which is not true because it's very different in terms of how those bottles are handled. And anybody else can, expound on that. I was just looking to see if there was anything else we missed.
Oh, a couple of people asked about postcards. You can send an email to me and my email will be in the email that you'll get later. I can pop it in the chat too. And we're sending them out in packets of 10. So if you want more than that, let us know.
Yeah, Michael?
Yeah, I'd really like to thank the CRC for the cleanup and for identifying that bottles and containers are a problem. We counted thousands of them over here in Green River, and I can see the effectiveness of getting of identifying what are the largest contaminants in our streams and our rivers. So I really want to thank you for bringing attention to that. This is really helpful, and I'm sure with the with the legislation, the kinds of numbers that are being generated through the cleanup will be helpful for them, so they can see that and they can kind of extrapolate that this is going on all our rivers throughout New England. So again, thank you very much, the Conservancy, for this program.
Thank you. You're a big part of it.
Oh.
Any last question from anybody on the line? And otherwise we'll say goodbye. All right, thank you. We hope we'll see you on November 10th for what is extended producer responsibility. Thank you, Jim, and everybody who joined us today, especially our CRC River Stewards. Bye for now.
Thank you.